Hello, I'm Curl Zeus, and this is a JAU news podcast about the recent events between the United States and Lakota and Cheyenne tribes. We also have an important announcement about the future of JAU news, so stay tuned. Here with me is my co-anchor, Dirty Dan.
We're going to talk about the Battle of Little Bighorn. What was the cause of this battle?
It all started in 1874 during an expedition led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer in the Black Hills. On the Great Sioux Reserve, Custer discovered gold. This caused an influx of miners which violated the Fort Laramie Treaty, with the Sioux and Lakota signing 6 years earlier. As a result, America attempted to buy the land from the Lakota, but they refused. The U.S. government told Philip Sheridan, commander of the Military Division of Missouri, to force the Lakota off the land.
What happened next?
Well, Sheridan created an expedition made up of 450 soldiers commanded by Colonel John Gibbon, 897 men under General Alfred Terry, and 1,000 men led by General George Crook to force the Lakota away to another reserve. Most of Terry's force, which included the 7th Cavalry, was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Custer. During the expedition, Terry and Gibbon discovered a Native American village, so they decided to make a plan. Custer was to act as a hammer and make a flank and attack the Native American village from the south and east, while Terry and Gibbon were to act as an anvil and attack from the north, preventing the Native Americans from escaping. The first problem occurred when the Native Americans discovered Custer following them to the south, so Custer decided the only way to save the battle was to attack immediately.
This is getting interesting. What next?
Custer decided to split his regiment into 4 groups: a pack train with ammo and supplies, a 3-company force of 125 commanded by Captain Frederick Benteen, a 3-company force of 140 commanded by Major Marcus Reno, and finally a 5-company force of 210 commanded by Custer. Benteen was originally sent to scout the south of the Native American village for other villages, while Reno was to create a skirmish line with his troops and attack the Native American village from the south. As Reno charged at the Native American village, warriors led by Chief Gall and Crazy Horse forced Reno to retreat to Reno Hill, and while Chief Gall and Crazy Horse charged on Reno, Sitting Bull helped the Native American women and children get to safety, and he also recruited some warriors. After searching for a while, Benteen found no villages, so he went back to Reno to regroup. While all this happened, Custer moved his troops north of the village along a ridge called Medicine Tail, but was ambushed as well, forcing him to retreat to Custer Hill. As his retreat went on, Custer's situation became dire as he lost half of his troops, so he sent a message to Benteen to bring the pack train. When Benteen got the message, he attempted to find Custer, but the hills were covered in such a thick layer of smoke it was impossible to find him. Since no reinforcements had arrived, Custer was surrounded and ultimately all his force and himself were killed. The warriors, after defeating Custer, moved to Reno on Reno's Hill and put it to a siege, but the siege were soon relieved when Terry and Gibbon arrived. This marked the end of a bloody battle.
Well, that was just a lot, but this gets me wondering, what strategies did the Native Americans use to win? And, while you're at it, what strategies did the U.S. soldiers use as well?
Sorry, Dirty Dan, I don't know the strategies that were used, but our main reporter Zara Ashton does.
Most people wanted the same thing. Indeed, the Native Americans won the battle, but we will get to them later, because the Americans had some tactics of their own. On the way to the village, Custer set up camp on June 24th, 25 miles from the Indian camp. The Native Americans discovered the United States camp, so Custer decided to attack immediately. Custer's army split up into 4 groups. There was a force of 125, commanded by Captain Frederick Benton. Another force of 140, commanded by Major Marcus Reno, and a force of 210, which was led by Custer himself. There was also a pack train with supplies. Now for the Native Americans' tactics. Once they discovered the soldiers, they immediately began to prepare, by sending women and children away from camp and preparing guns for their warriors. When Reno and his army rode in, Chief Gall led an attack on his skirmish line, forcing them to withdraw into the woods. After a while, Reno came back, and yet again the Native Americans forced Reno to retreat. They would start most battles with groups only showing a few of the warriors, but then increased in size as the fight continued. To avoid being seen, they would flatten their feathers. Also, they climbed up on hills on hands and legs, as well as hiding behind any bump on the hill. They also used the pattern of quick and intense attacks, followed by quiet rest to deal with their enemies.
Thanks, Zare. Well, now it's my turn to ask a question. What was the effect on this battle on the Native Americans?
Well, many Native Americans were moved onto strict reservations while Chief Gall, Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse retreated to the north. People pushed for the Native Americans to be punished for killing Custer. They sent General Rowland Mackenzie. After a long battle, Chief Gall, Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse ran away to refugee camps. After being chased by the government, Chief Gall turned himself in, and eventually Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse followed.
Wow, thanks, Dan. We now have an exclusive interview with George Herndon, a civilian who served as a scout for the 7th Cavalry under Major Reno's command about Reno's skirmish.
Thank you, Zeus. So, Hendron, what happened at the beginning of the fight?
Well, Reno took a steady gallop down the creek bottom 3 miles where it emptied into the Little Horn and found a natural ford across Little Horn River. He crossed over and formed his companies on the prairie. He advanced about a mile from the ford to a line of timber on the right and dismounted his men to fight on foot. The Indians, mounted on ponies, came across the prairie and opened fire on the soldiers. After skirmishing for a few minutes, Reno fell back to the timber.
What did the Native Americans do next?
Next, the Indians moved to his left and rear, evidently with the intention of cutting him off from the ford. Reno ordered his men to mount and move through the timber, but as his men got into the saddle, the Sioux, who advanced to the timber, fired at close range and killed some soldiers. Colonel Reno then commanded the men to dismount, and they did so. But he soon ordered them to mount again and moved out to the open prairie to retreat back to Reno Hill.
What do you think about this battle?
This was a very tragic battle full of death and despair. The Indian attackers were merciless and killed without pity. We need to find a way to punish them and make sure this never happens again. We can't let the Indians ever get this powerful and stand over us.
Thank you, Hendron.
As I mentioned before, we have some important news concerning the future of JAU news. This is our main reporter, Zare Ashen's last day. The entire JAU news team is sad to hear about Zare's departure, but we can always end on something positive. Wednesdays are awesome!